Good morning and welcome to IBC's 2018 IMIS webinar series. This is a continuation from the series of webinars we started last year in 2017. This morning we will be looking at Roadmap to Reporting, also a continuation of part 2 of our Roadmap to Reporting we started last November. We will be talking about how to continue with that from the planning stages to actually reaching your report's destination. So, welcome. This morning, before we begin, I'd like to just take a moment to point out some of our housekeeping rules. You guys, the attendees, will be muted during the presentation. However, we will open the floor throughout the presentation. We're going to ask some poll questions, get you guys to participate this morning, wake you up. And when we do, you'll be able to answer the poll. And also, if you have questions, you can place them in the chat window and I will relay them to our presenter. Additionally, we have some time dedicated at the end of the presentation for any additional questions that you might have at the end. So next, I just want to tell you a little bit about IBC. It was co-founded by myself, I'm Melissa Mack, and my business partner, Jody Sawyer. Our main goal and our team's goal is to help all of our clients feel good about technology. And we've proven this, we believe we've proven this over and over again through receiving the highest customer satisfaction ratings indicated by ASI's independent surveys of our IMIS clients. Next up, I'd like to tell you a little bit about your speaker today, Amanda Iverson. Amanda's been harnessing, need more coffee. Amanda has been harnessing the power of IMIS for over 5 years in her role here as IBC as project manager and senior application architect. Prior to working for IBC, she was like you guys. She spent over 15 years in the association industry in a variety of roles. We believe that background, her skills and experience in the industry provide a very unique perspective to successful IMIS design and implementation and recommendations that we can make for the IMIS community and our clients. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amanda to get started. We've got a lot to cover today.
Thanks, Melissa. You make me sound so good.
You are so good. You are.
I want to wish a happy Thursday to all of you who joined us. I know you guys have busy schedules. So I thank you for participating in this webinar. And if you missed part 1, you can watch it on the IBC YouTube channel. This link that's displaying here, we are going to provide this to you after today's presentation. Once we upload this video, so we'll include a lot of the helpful and resource links that are going to be used throughout here, including this one here. So that way, if you missed a few of our webinars before, you can join them on the YouTube channel and watch them at your leisure. And in particular, for part 1 of this series, for organizing your IMIS reports. And just so that we're all on the same page, because we are going to get into the nitty-gritty details today, I want to do a quick refresher just at a high level of what we've covered in part 1. So of course you want to make time to review your existing IMIS reports library, identify reports being used and those no longer helpful. You'll want to check your data on a regular basis and make sure that it stays clean and it's in sync, and you can use data integrity checks in the form of IQA query reports or SSRS reports to be sure that your data is being reported is in tip-top shape. Brush up on your reporting skills like IQA queries and SSRS, and you'll want to plan for the future of IMIS. You want to prepare for an upgrade or at least identify your timeline for when you need to say goodbye to the desktop client. Understand available reporting tools and how to use them, some of which we're going to cover today. And of course, start the conversation with your colleagues. You'll want to identify their reporting needs and then adjust your course as needed. And most importantly, don't wait to get started. Reporting impacts IMIS users regardless of your version, so it is important that you start the planning process now. So as you can see, we've already trekked miles in part 1 to reach where we are today, which is why it's time to buckle up now and get ready for the ride. Here's what we're going to cover in this session. We're going to learn how to migrate IQA queries to the staff site. We're going to learn how to add access to the staff site for those IQA menus that used to be accessible from the desktop client. We're going to review real-life use cases for SSRS reports. And then we're going to look at providing the ultimate customer service, self-service. So this presentation today is designed to cover the details. So we're going to get into specific, components within the RISE system and within IMIS. So if you're not familiar with some of these, I definitely recommend, some additional training just so that you become familiar and then revisit this video later down the road once some of these have been mastered. So since this presentation is focused on the details, I do want to take a moment to highlight the continuum section of the staff site. If you're not yet familiar with this, I do suggest that you make time to browse the library. Each version of IMIS 20.2 and higher comes with example SSRS reports that you can use with minimal tweaking. And of course, IMIS 2017 installs with an expansive library of templates offering really clean designs and intuitive layouts. It's pretty much all done for you. You just need to brand it or tweak some of the background criteria. And you'll see references to the continuum area throughout these slides today. So I did want to just take a moment to clarify why this should become a part of your IMIS knowledge base. So let's waste no time and let's jump into our first example. Let's set up access to queries on the staff site. Some of you may be accessing your IQA queries from these menus within the modules of the desktop client. In IMIS version 20.2 and higher, these menus were no longer available from this location. It was an attempt to encourage users to access it from the staff site instead, preparing you for future versions of IMIS. Within the desktop client view, each IQA menu it displays within the module, it will show a file path reference accessible from the staff site. This location will tell you where to find the queries and subfolders that are displayed within the desktop client. So once you have the file path from the desktop client, you'll navigate to the staff site and find that specific IQA menu under RISE. This is where all IQA queries are used. This is where they're housed. Many of these are system queries and used by iParts, so this folder structure that you see here, many of them won't be familiar to you, but they are used throughout IMIS. So here's the physical location of the file path that we just reviewed in the previous slides. These are the queries that are displayed in the customers module of the desktop client. For a quick reference, here are also the default locations for the other desktop modules, including events, you'll find under event management and drill down. Orders, you'll find under the order management folder if you drill down. And of course, fundraising. The second step is to create a content record where these queries will live on the staff site. You can also update an existing content record. Just keep in mind that your IQA query menus and their result sets can make for a very cumbersome and hard to maneuver content area. If you've got an IQA that returns, hundreds of rows, or you have it configured to return several, that can get really busy on its own. And then if you combine that with other content areas, it just could get really overwhelming for your staff. So the goal of migrating reports to the staff site is to make sure that they're easy to find and easy to use. So for my example today, I chose to create a separate content record called IQA Customers that will only house my queries from the customer module. So as a side note for those of you watching, my screenshots are intended to provide the navigation path to access the areas we're covering. So in our example here, for creating content, you'll want to access RISE as shown on the left side menu. You'll want to go to Page Builder and Manage Content. So now that we have our content, we need to add function. This is where iParts show off. You'll click to add content and navigate to the query menu iPart. You can review the configuration options to determine which are best based on where this IQA query will displayed. Now keep in mind, we're just specifically reviewing adding them to the staff site, but of course you might want to add this to the member site. Maybe your organization needs queries on the member site so that chapter officers can generate their own real-time rosters. So this same functionality, you can also replicate on the member site. You'll just want to review these configuration options. You might want to offer different export features for the staff site, but maybe not export capability on the member site. Completely up to your organization. So for our source query that's highlighted here on the screen, we're going to choose the IQA folder or a specific IQA. Now, my example today, I want to choose this contact folder because I want everything within the contact folder, including subfolders, to be available to me in a very easy drop-down form, which we're going to see in a few moments. If you point this directly to a query, only that one specific query will be accessible and usable from the content record. So it really restricts the use, but then also it forces you to create an individual content record for every single query that you need to make. So my recommendation to you guys today is base your IQA folder structure and your subfolder library based on how you want these queries to be accessed from the content records. So that way you can group them using subfolders and then link this to the subfolder versus having individual content records. So here's what that should look like once you're done. We've created a content record, we've added our content, which is the query menu iPart, we've selected our data source, now we can save and publish. So now the final step is to add a way for staff to access the content that we just created. This is managed by sitemaps. Navigate to Rise, Site Builder, and Manage Sitemaps. Be sure to select the staff site from the dropdown or use your member site if the content that we're creating is for volunteer leaders or officers. Select a module where you want this to live and add a new navigation item. Then you select the content that you just created to link to the new menu item. In our example today, I'm linking the IQA customers content record to this menu under the community module. Now, if it's applicable to your workflow, you'll want to click on the Access Settings tab in case you need to hide this menu item from certain IMIS users. So an example of this might be if the meetings department shouldn't be running their own membership list or statistics, you might want your meetings department to request that information from the membership team. So hiding this particular menu item from logged in meetings department users will sort of protect that and force them to go to someone on the membership team, or this can just dynamically display, if I'm logged in and I'm a membership team, I'll see this menu option available to me. So here's the result of what we created. An IQA customers menu under the community navigation on the left. Now we'll have the drop down of available queries within the location that we selected. And here's a visual. So just so that you can see, how this was linked, the steps that we just covered, here's the physical location. I pointed our iPart data source to the contact folder, and this is how it renders. And you'll notice the subfolders appear as bolded headers in the dropdown. So it's a great way to organize your IQA query library, and you won't need several different content records, as I shared, to manage those queries. Just organize your folders in a smart way, and you'll save yourself time in the long run. And for those of you who are on earlier versions of IMIS 20.2, you can display these folders across as columns. So in our version, it's going to show with the bolded headers, but the older versions do show as columns across as the subfolders. So having that same capability to organize is available to you. So by now, your staff should be getting really comfortable with the staff site. So one of the best ways to boost efficiency is to add frequently used queries to the dashboards. So let's go check out how that's done. But first, let's check in with a quick poll. Are you currently using dashboards on the staff site? And I'll turn it over to Melissa.
All right, I'm going to launch the poll. Are you currently using dashboards on the staff site? And if the attendees can answer the questions on the screen, that would be great. All right, we're getting some answers in. Nice. Collecting 80% voted. Couple more people want to vote? Yeah. Awesome. 90% voted. 95. One more person. Anybody else? I'm going to close this poll, I think. We're done with that. Let's see the results. So just a moment, I will share the results. We can take a look. It's almost even. Right? Almost all even. But the highest answer was sort of, and yes and no. So a lot of people out there still getting, I guess, familiar with dashboards and configuring them for their organization. Interesting.
Well,
yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now and turn it back over to you, Amanda.
Thanks, Melissa. It's assuring for us, a year or so ago when the staff site first came out, or almost 2 years now, those poll answers would have been very different. Most of you probably wouldn't have been using it, so it's really nice to see that a lot of you are putting it to use, you're configuring it, or at least you're starting to look at the use of it for your organization, because it really can do a lot if you just spend the time to understand how the components work together, and then of course set it up so that you give success to your staff. So for those of you who are sort of using it, or are still using some of the out-of-the-box dashboards and haven't really played with that, and of course, for those of you who are not using dashboards and have no idea what we're referring to, I'm just going to show a couple of examples here.
Yeah, and Amanda, if I could just interject, NIAC has some great classes going on and even recordings on dashboards and how to configure them for your organization as well. If there's an interest in upcoming webinars, that may be one we can put on our schedule for this year.
Oh,
so
that'd be great. Yeah.
Go on.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thanks.
So here we're looking at the events dashboard that installs with IMIS 2017. The information that's displayed here mainly comes from IQA queries, but the dashboard content, as I mentioned, can be configured to your organization's needs. These numbers may not exactly reflect how you define your event revenue or the registrations that you would like to count. So we definitely recommend sort of looking behind the scenes. Quick statistics are readily available, and these are driven by IQA query filter criteria. They simply display counts based on what criteria is included in the IQA query. The charts and graphs, these iParts display a visual representation of your key demographic data based on IQA query results. So you can see how that reporting tool is used throughout the staff site to make your lives easier. So understanding how to use and edit those queries will go a long way. And one of my personal favorites of the iPart collection is the Content Collection Organizer. This offers quick access to the most important data for colleagues that need to access the events dashboard. So you've got a couple of tabs here that give you quick access to maybe your most frequently used queries or commonly requested reports that you need to provide. So it's always on the dashboard. It's one of the first things that you see when you click on a specific area of the staff site. So you want your commonly used items here. So here's a visual of the community dashboard. Now, as you're reviewing this screenshot, just as a bit of housekeeping, it is an IBC best practice to create a copy of the staff dashboard content and make time to update your staff sitemap. Doing this once will ensure you can easily configure the content to your organization. The out-of-the-box workflows for the dashboards that you see here, they do include protected content, which means that you can't make edits to it. And that's good on both sides. You can customize it to your organization very easily. You have a working example if you need to refer back to how they did it when IMIS was first installed. And you also protect your content from future upgrades. It will never be overwritten as long as you're making a copy of these dashboards. So if you set your staff site up correctly in the beginning, you're going to avoid some of these speed bumps later down the line when you do need to customize. Now here's a visual of the membership dashboard where you'll find quick information on new and renewing members and chapters. My last example here is the commerce dashboard, helpful for keeping tabs on orders and fulfillment. So if you're unsure of how to configure, these individual dashboards or identifying if you need dashboards beyond just what installs here, reach out to your authorized service provider to get help. Like I said, once it's configured, you're ready to start personalizing and start using it, and your staff should notice the efficiency and the ease with which they can produce and fulfill requests. So now let's look at how each of these are configured for the underlying iParts. We're going to use one of the dashboards as our example. So you're going to want to start by enabling Easy Edit to save you from finding content on your own. This is the icon that's shown here. It allows you to edit content and iParts in place. It's really quite the time saver, so you don't have to fish around to find the content that you're looking to edit. So once this is turned on, the IQA queries then refresh and then display a link to directly modify the source query as shown here. For other iParts, you will need to click the content record icon. Now this is found in the lower left and only appears when Easy Edit is enabled. So if you're not seeing this icon or icons as you're hovering over the page, it probably means that your Easy Edit is turned off, or if you work in multiple tabs like I do, you might just need to refresh the tab that you're using so the browser recognizes that Easy Edit is turned on. So once we edit the content record, we're going to look for these two chart iParts that we have here. So this way we can make changes on the fly. If we click to configure, we're going to see the individual configuration options available for these particular iParts. We can also identify which IQA query is providing the underlying data. Now, obviously, we here at IBC suggest making a copy of the default IQA query, make your edits to the copy of that query, and then update the source query listed here instead of editing the original query. This way you can keep the original as a working example should you ever need it, and then you can work from your copy if you need to make tweaks. So for the content collection organizer, the process is similar to what we set up in the last segment. Each tab of a CCO iPart, that's what we hipsters call it, is pointing to a content record. The individual content records are configured to display queries, reports, and recently viewed items, although it really can point to anything. It could be static content with a bunch of PDF links on it. So you can add as many or few of these tabs as you need to the staff site. Each dashboard is going to have its own set, so the tabs will display differently between the events dashboard from those that are displayed in the community and commerce areas. And if you're not yet familiar with content collection organizers, search this term on the ASI help site, or my preferred method, go play in your test environment. Reverse engineer, or backtrace for a better term, existing content records so that you can see how they work. Dissect them, feel free to edit them without worrying that you're going to impact your production environment. So now on to section 2. We are hitting the SSRS highway. Our speed is going to increase and we are really going to take off. Our first example is great for anyone who hosts on-site meetings. Now, for this presentation, I've chosen examples that use out-of-the-box reports so that you have a place to start after today's webinar. None of these examples and references that I'm mentioning today have to be created from scratch. All of these exist in the 20.2 environment. For those of you who are on earlier versions of 20.2, they might just look a little different or be located in a different place. And some of the SSRS reports that we'll look at in the next section of this presentation will only be accessible from 2017, but Melissa will point those out as we go along. So the example that we're going to jump into today is to print meeting badges on badge stock. I'm starting from finding the annual conference event from the events dashboard on the staff site. The cool thing is that each event has its own dashboard. And now this is separate from the main events module that has its dashboard that considers all meetings and all meeting revenue, not just the one you're viewing. But for today's purpose, I want to print badges for the annual conference. These registration envelopes won't stuff themselves. Now, as you can see from this drop-down, IMIS includes lots of useful and relevant reports. This is why I recommend you go play. Pull these reports, see what they look like, see the layout, see the configuration options. But for today, we're just going to print attendee badges. So the SSRS report here is configured to pick up the parameter from my URL. It recognizes that I'm looking at the annual conference. So when I pull this report, only annual conference attendees are included by default. Now, there are some runtime options like including guest or printing a badge for a specific attendee, because there's always that one attendee who loses their lanyard, or at least one. When you peek behind the content records and you follow the path, it leads you here. You'll navigate to Continuum and look at the Event Reports submenu. The content and related iParts on the previous slide are referencing the combined badge and tickets report shown here. And as you can see, there's a variety of other reports available. So our second option, we're going to look at creating a dynamic committee roster in printable format. So with IMIS including so many templates, it's safe to say that your desired report could already exist. So for our example, let's say you need to print an agenda and minutes for upcoming, finance committee meeting. And part of that packet might include a printed roster of all active committee members and their contact information. So I'm going to start by finding the finance committee under the community module. Instantly, I already see a quick query of current committee members. And looky there, a print roster button is already waiting for me.
I love that. That's so easy.
Yeah, IMIS really is intuitive out of the box. You just might need to make a couple of tweaks to it to really bring forward what your organization would use. This default roster here includes a specific layout, and it can be modified at runtime as well in case I want to sort this by committee role and not necessarily the member's name. So you can configure buttons to produce committee labels or different roster layouts, just like that handy print roster button was right there on the committee page. You can do that as well for other options. So as you can see here, under Continuum and Contact Reports, there's a couple of mailing labels or just 2-column format layouts that you might want to utilize and personalize. So it's best to determine what staff need and configure the staff site to support efficient workflows to complete their daily tasks. Put these buttons where they need to run them, so it's very easy and efficient for them to complete their work. Now, these are just 2 examples of how you can begin using SSRS reports out of the box with your current version, starting now. And I'm also going to include resources at the end of this presentation to learn how to customize the template with your organization's logo, branding, and style. Now, for our final section, here's where we go into warp speed. If you're not used to working with content records, IQA queries, or iParts, then this next section may make you car sick, but just take it 1 mile at a time. Get some training, read through some documentation, work with your authorized service provider, and then come back and rewatch this section once you've mastered RISE and SSRS. It really does help to have a solid understanding of these tools before you jump into the contents that we're about to. So here's a relevant use case for organizations today. Let's say you want to offer the ability for attendees to print their registration confirmation from your website. It could be for an upcoming meeting or maybe a receipt as a past event. The user logs into the member site and views their account area where they see upcoming meetings for which they're registered. John here registered, and he's registered for the annual meeting. So he's going to click to view his registration to see which sessions he signed up for and to print his registration confirmation. And with the click of a button, John has access to a dynamic event registration confirmation and a beautifully branded layout. Now, this layout here does come with IMIS 2017 only. Some of you in the later versions of 20.2 would have some form of this, but not this exact layout, look, and feel. So here's a reminder from part 1 of this series. This is the formula to help you understand how providing self-service works. You start with an IQA query, which produces results. For John, we're identifying which events he's registered for. And we'll review this in step-by-step detail so that we can see how the SSRS report and the iParts equal self-service as we go through. So let's look at this again. Here's the IQA query. These are the results that display to John on the My Account page that he'll see when he logs in. This is just an IQA query. When I look at the content record, I can identify which IQA query is being used to display this information. Once I find that IQA query, if I want to limit how many registrations are shown, if I want to include past registrations, I can add my own changes to the IQA query, or I can add another section for past events. So this is that default query, My Registrations. It's configured to display results and display a link where attendees can access and view their registration details. Now, here's just a quick tip for those of you who joined us today. This default query is available in all 20.2 versions. It's called My Registrations. As I mentioned, it just might be in a different location, a different folder for some of you earlier 20.2 version folks. But if you make a copy of this, you can easily use this between the member site and the staff site. The default query that's shown here for My Registrations is designed for the staff site, but if you change the contact key property that's highlighted on the screen, if you change that value to @logged-in-user, you can very easily use this for the member site. So this one small change means that when it's accessed from the member site, it's going to recognize John as the logged-in user and only show his registrations. Pretty cool. So the display tab is what the users see from the My Account area. So this is where the magic happens. The event key is used as a URL parameter so that he can see details only for the annual conference when he clicks through the links. If you check the last display property I've got listed here, you'll see that it says cast view registration and a couple of other expressions. This is actually a custom SQL expression field that's used to display a clickable link. This is something that's just default IQA functionality. If you're not familiar with this, it definitely would become a handy tool. Once you've mastered IQA, you'll start looking at it through the advanced view instead of basic. When you click advanced and you scroll to the bottom of the display tab, you'll see that custom SQL expression that you can create, cool HTML buttons or even clickable links like in our example today. So within this link, you'll see that it's going to redirect users to the event registration detail. That's shown for the second yellow highlighted item. This is where, when John clicks this link, it's going to redirect him to. Now, I can tell by looking at this that this is actually a shortcut and not a specific content record. So to reverse engineer this, I would need to look at my shortcuts to identify what content record the event registration detail is pointing to. So let's review this formula again. We just looked at the IQA query that returns active event registrations. This query is configured to link to a content record where John can view his registration details and print a confirmation. But to keep today's session short, I'm going to go right to the report that's being used by that content record, the event registration confirmation shown here. And as I said, I found this by reverse engineering that content record once I identified it from the shortcut so that I could figure out, which specific report was being used.
And just to add to that, that list of SSRS reports that you see there, if the attendees don't have them in their version of IMIS 20, it is because ASI is continuing to rewrite the old desktop crystal reports in SSRS. Every new version of IMIS 20, every patch has additional reports in it. We have learned that if you are on an earlier version of 20 and you take one of these RDL files, it may or may not work. It's kind of been a trial and error. If the database structure has not been changed, if there's not a new view or business object that has been introduced to support the SSRS file, the actual SSRS report may work in earlier versions of 20 as a shortcut rather than having to maybe create a report from scratch. So could work, could be a shortcut, could save some time, no guarantees. Obviously, the best thing to do is to get on the latest and greatest versions to take advantage of all of the reports they're adding to the system.
Absolutely. Also a good reason to make really good friends with your IMIS users. So the NIA community, this is a great icebreaker so that you can, possibly ask if they've got a report that you might be able to use for your version. So definitely a good reason to make friends among the community.
Mm-hmm. Sorry for the interruption.
No, it was a good interruption. So John sees his active registrations from the IQA query results, which are linked to the formatted SSRS report that we just identified. Now we're going to pair it with an iPart so that John can view the details from the member site. This is what results in that self-service. John doesn't have to call the organization to request this. He doesn't have to wait for someone to manually reproduce it or run it and email it to him. And if he's on his own schedule and 9 p.m. at night is the best time that he can, pull this information, or that he remembers that he needs to pull this, he can go ahead and take care of it himself. So here's the content record linked to the IQA query results. It uses a report display iPart to render the SSRS report that we identified so that John sees that beautiful registration confirmation in a pop-up window. And it does include some helpful configuration options, as all iParts do. So as you see here, so that it can help you drive the user experience that you want to offer. It gives you control over what should be happening on the member site. So for our example, inspecting the query string that's checked here at the bottom of this configuration option, I have this enabled because I want the report to pick up the annual conference meeting code. So if I did not have this checked, then John would see confirmations for all of his upcoming meetings, not just the annual conference. And remember, that event key, the parameter that's being fed through, is supplied by our IQA query results. So let's run through this for these combined solutions just one more time. John sees his upcoming events from his account area after logging into the member site. He clicks to view the registration details, which takes him to a content record where he can print his registration confirmation. The pop-up window displays with a nicely formatted confirmation with the details of his annual conference. So let's take a moment now that I've gone through the first run through of pairing these items together, and let's take a poll to kind of identify what your current comfort level is with pairing these components together to provide self-service. So I'll turn it back over to Melissa.
Okay, let's turn on the poll here. I'm going to launch it. Wake up some people. See if you'll participate in our poll to see what your comfort level is. We're getting some responses. Yay. Okay. 90% have voted. Anybody else? Any last responses before I close the poll? Does not appear to be. So let me go ahead and close this poll and share our results. A lot of uncomfortableness in pairing those together, the IQA with the SSRS and iParts. So definitely something to look into for training. And of course, if you don't have the time, working with a solution provider. But I like 32%. There's quite a few people, 32 between the 32 and 11, over, nearly half that are somewhat comfy. So interesting poll results. With that, I will turn it back over to you. Let me close out this poll. 1 second, hit the button. Okay.
Great.
Return to our regularly scheduled program.
Thanks, Melissa.
You're welcome.
For those of you who are uncomfortable, or somewhat comfy, if you don't already have a test or a staging environment, we strongly encourage that to be available so that you have a playground where you can test the processes that your customers and members are going through on the live site. So it's a really good area for you to play and practice, and then apply some of what I'm sharing today. Reverse engineer some of these workflows so that it becomes second nature. Pull up this YouTube video. Once we upload it, pause it at different parts so that your screenshot can match my screen. So your screen can match my screenshot to make sure you're in the right area as you become familiar with these sections. So definitely something we strongly recommend. So our final example today is focused on invoicing, something everyone can use in one form or another. So this content record and iPart combination is available out of the box. This is just, how it's paired once it comes out. So there, you don't need to do any magic to, have your content record appear the same as mine. This open invoices section, this is actually an iPart available in later versions of 20.2 and 2017. So for earlier versions, you guys may not have that specific iPart available to you. However, you can replicate it with the IQA query as well. It's going to isolate specific invoices to be paid online from the member site. So John wants to view his statement before paying online, or maybe submit something to his accounting department so that they can cut a check. He can click on the View Statement button to view a branded statement of his account. Now, I'm using this example for OpenAR invoices, but it can be tailored for orders, subscriptions, meetings, or even dues. Once the user clicks the View Statement button, this is what appears. The report that's behind it can be customized to, whether you want it to be a dues statement or, an order fulfillment piece. So when we look under the hood of the content record, we find that the View Statements iPart is actually using what's called a Big Button Panel iPart. This iPart displays a button that has a link behind it, or a hyperlink, configured to open in a new window. I can see which content record it's linked to, shown here. I'll now navigate to the content record so that I can identify which SSRS report is used to produce the AR statement. So John pulls up his account, he sees a button that's linked to the content record that we're pulling up here, which is account statement. Now, as you can see, excuse me, as you can see, this one has a little lock on it. That means that it's protected content. You can't make any changes to that specific content record. This is why I recommend making copies of things so that you can then update the SSRS report it's pointing to, and then just change the Big Button Panel iPart to link to your copy of account statement instead. So once I look at the account statement content record, I can see specifically the file path for the actual report that's being used. Here it shows that it's going to accounting, the default system, reports, and account statement. Now the configuration options here will show me the full file path in case that initial view doesn't display it. And as well, you have options of whether you can display export features. And then, of course, if we need to pass parameters or if we want to see everything for that logged in user. So here's that referenced report. This is a really great template to start from to produce invoices and dues renewal bills. It's got a really great layout. I mean, it has all the bells and whistles of an actual invoice. So it's a really great place to start from. Now, for those of you who either have paid attention thus far or our polls are waking you up, you'll notice that I'm using the document system here to access this instead of Continuum. I just wanted to, showcase this as another method to access your library. The document system includes all object types, not just your SSRS reports and templates. And for you web geeks like myself, this is not the same as your document manager, the folder that's used to manage public files that are accessible from your member site. Two totally different locations, but you can access that same file path for these SSRS reports using the document system under RISE as you can Continuum. Continuum shows only reports and SSRS templates, while this one displays all objects within the IMIS database. So I just wanted to highlight that for you. So with that, that's from start to finish of how we got to, with our view statement, we're showing a beautifully formatted invoice, and this is the source for that invoice. So now we're going to go ahead and start to wrap up, but I want to talk about next steps. Included with our presentation, we reviewed the fundamentals of these tools and how they should be used. This is a starting point. You should have enough knowledge now that's shared here and between part 1 of our webinar series to start offering formatted reports, easy access to IQA queries, and self-service fulfillment to your colleagues and your members. When you're ready to begin branding your SSRS report templates, check out the resources included here. Lots of the examples are set it and forget it, so it could be worth the investment to work with your authorized service provider to get you on your way. Of course, participating in the NIAG community and attending all of their annual conferences throughout the year is a great way to learn more about what we covered today. When you get to the branding for your logo and your style, you do need a solid foundation of how to edit SSRS reports, and then also working between the templates and then pulling them into a report tool where you can personalize them. But like I said, once you set the templates, you can use them over and over again for multiple uses throughout your site. So definitely worth the investment. I'm also going to include specific links from the ASI help site that's going to be relevant to what we reviewed today. These will be included as text form in our follow-up email as well as the description of the YouTube channel, but it's just enough to get you on your way and kind of continue on after today's presentation. So I'll now turn it back over to Melissa to facilitate your questions.
Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, feel free to enter them into the chat window or even the questions panel, and we can see if we can answer them. I do think it's important to note that as IMIS progresses with future releases of IMIS, we are getting away from crystal reports. SSRS and IQAs, as we said in part 1 of this seminar last November, are the future. And so making an effort to do new reports using one of those tools and or rewrite existing important reports is very important at this time. So I'm not seeing any questions. So I guess if there's no questions, we can wrap it up and just send our follow-up email. And if you want to reach us offline, there's some information we wanted to share with you about the upcoming conference in the spring. This is the next NIAG conference, April 4 through 6. It's going to be in the Chicago area. And we've got a great program planned for you. There will also be, which is a less known conference, is a tech summit from NIAG. I believe that's going to be in July, so there'll be more information coming on that as well. And just a little bit about our services. If you're interested, you can reach us offline. Thank you guys for your time this morning, and thank you, Amanda, for presenting for us.
Thank you all for your time.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.